Well, we love to see the engagement, guys. So please feel free adding it. But we are gonna get going. All right. So one more time, good morning, good afternoon. And I'm sorry, Meena, do you hear the noises? No? Okay. You only can
Yeah.
hear my voice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have this big playground behind me, and they just decided to start a big event. So it's quite noisy on my end, but I'm so glad this is
No, you're
keeping
all good.
you guys can't hear it. Fantastic. All right. Well, let's kick it off. Everyone, Paige, Megan, Dana, welcome, welcome. All right. So everyone, I am Yulia Zhernovaya. I am head of strategy and growth at Giveffect. And at Giveffect, we provide 10-in-1 nonprofit platform with all the software to build relationship and manage your donors, volunteers, events, marketing, fundraisers, grants, you name it, to streamline operation, eliminate manual work, and enable nonprofit team to focus on their mission rather than administrative tasks. And today, I'm so thrilled to welcome you to this speed learning sessions for our topic, data that drives results, smarter year-end strategies for nonprofits. And I am so excited to be joined by fantastic Meena Das from Namaste Data. Meena is a leading voice in helping nonprofits to use data intentionally to drive better outcomes. Well, Meena, I'm going to pass it to you to tell everyone a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. And I am so excited and grateful to be here, Yulia. Hello, everyone. I see a lot of good afternoons and good mornings. Well, I am in my good morning. I am joining from the beautiful Vancouver, BC, which is the lands of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations here. I am the founder of a consulting practice called Namaste Data, which talks and teaches and speaks and reads about data equity and AI equity. And I am beyond grateful to talk about data collection, which kind of in my heart feels like the first solid step when we speak of data. So, Yulia, back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like July is just an ideal timing. Well, I'm ready to talk about all day and every week. This time of the year feels like especially the right time, as so many of nonprofits are preparing for the upcoming year end giving season. And what can be a better time to reevaluate your mid-year reset and talk about data? So just a couple of housekeeping items for everyone. This session is 45 minutes. So we're going to spend about 25 minutes having a conversation based on the questions that we received during the registration. So thank you so much, everyone, for submitting the questions. And then the last 15 minutes, we are going to have a live Q&A. So as we go today through the session, please feel free to utilize Q&A button on the bottom of the screen, and at any time submit your questions and we'll get to them in about 25 minutes or so. And without further ado, let's get started. The first question, I just kind of want to start with the basics, if you wish. So I'm curious, when a nonprofit is preparing for year end, how should they think about the data collection and what would be the right first step to take?
I'm going to say that this is a little bit relevant for the entire year, so not just about the year end. But if you are thinking about year end specifically, you do want to know who lives in your data. That is the step one. Before we go out and ask for another gift and think about segmentations and prioritizations and reporting and analytics and all that good stuff that all of a sudden hits us come fall in September and we start strategizing, I think the step number one is you getting to know who lives in your data, which means if you haven't heard so far in the first 6 months of this year, who is in your community, why are they there in your data, what motivates them to give you gifts, what motivates them, and what feelings are they carrying through everything that we have gone through in the first 6 months of 2025. If you haven't taken the time yet, my suggestion would be that's your first step, getting to know your family, getting to know your community, getting to know who is in your data. And how you can get started, I mean, we are going to talk in a lot of different questions how we can get started, but I'm going to say data collection is the number one step. If you haven't thought of doing a survey in this year so far, I'm going to encourage you to do one, an inclusive survey that think about the language, the context, the trust, all those pieces. Again, we will get into it, but your step one is your intentionality to know your community. Who is in it? Why are they interested to be here? How can I talk to them? What language do they prefer? What are their barriers? What are their points of joy that I can use as I am listening to why they're here? I'm going to say, Yulia, that is really important as we are thinking about year end right now.
So just kind of confirm, right? We should be thinking about it year around, but if we're preparing for end of the year, there's still time, right? We can still, if the nonprofit still didn't do it, this is a good time still to take advantage and take a step forward to collect some data or listen to some data.
100%. I think this is the perfect time. I get the question most often, when should I do my big survey? When should I do my annual data collection project? What's the ideal time? You do want to avoid a little bit of that May and June summer months because people are in their summer vacation. But I definitely recommend most of my projects to do take July and August as the months for doing your data listening work, that you have enough space and room for your staff members to engage with it, as well as your community to engage with your data listening tools in these 2 months. And then you take September and October almost to listen to that data. What does that data say? Who lives in that data? What do we do with it? Do we put some of these into segmentation? Do we use some of these into cross-tabbing? You build strategy in October and November, or September and October. And then in November and December, you put it to action. You use it to go out and do your engagement and conversation and stewardship and whichever word we want to pick, but that same data can help you, enable you to do what you intended and set out to do for the year end. So this is the perfect time. It doesn't come with like any pressures, and I think we can start now thinking about it.
Fantastic. One thing you just mentioned, that I wanted to address before we go any further is, I think I was saying data collection and you were saying data listening, right? So I'm curious, I guess, what is the difference from your point of view, and also why that mindset shift from data collection to data listening is important?
I think it's a pretty slight shift, to be honest. Like collection feels almost extractive, doesn't it? Like, it's collecting, like I'm asking you to give me something and I'll collect it and put it. It doesn't build ownership. It doesn't build accountability. It doesn't tell you what will Meena do after taking this from me. I wish I could say data co-dreaming or something, but that's like pretty long. And I'm sure the marketing ninjas will hate me for that.
Yeah.
But data listening almost makes me feel like I'm not taking anything from you. The entire purpose is my intention, that I want to listen to what are the beliefs of my community who live in my data. That's all the purpose of my interest to take or use or collect this data. So instead of saying collection, which is only about the action, data listening puts more onus on the intention. It's not so much about the action, it's more about the intention of the purpose of this work, which is we do want to listen. We do want to understand what our community says, which is why I'm more in favor. I know the data collection is a term that we use very commonly, very often, and so I tend to use it, but my heart belongs to the word data listening.
Yeah. But as you explain it to me, even more sounds like when we're collecting the data, it's like a repository. We're just going to collect, store it, and we're going to keep it somewhere. And then what are we actually, it's like, it's not, it doesn't have that action oriented that we're actually going to do something. We're just like, it sounds like and I think we'll talk about it a lot of time, we're storing the data. But what we want to talk today is like, how do we listen to the data and then use the input to inform your next campaign, conversation with the donor program, volunteer initiative, and so on.
Right. It almost like it, the other reason I like the term is it almost naturally fits a bit of accountability on the person whose
Mm,
project it is. Like the data I will listen or collect, whichever word we are going to use, always belongs to the community, the data ownership,
mm,
who owns this data. Just because I have a system and I store it doesn't mean
mm,
I own the data. That belongs to the community. We need to get that straight and understand that I don't have the permission unless I seek that permission formally,
mm,
that consent to simply use it and extract value out of it for the sake of my
mm,
work. But what I can do, however, is own that responsibility, let the community know that I take that responsibility very seriously, and then take that consent to do what we need to do. Some co-dreaming, some
mm,
co-scheming, but we do need to
mm.
talk about these words of intentionality,
Yeah.
consent, confidentiality,
Mm.
all important words.
When it comes to data, yeah, couldn't agree more. So now let's talk about, all right, where nonprofit needs to collect the data. And this is a big
Yeah.
question, but
Okay.
where are some of the, I guess, common places, right? We're thinking about year end, specifically thinking about maybe donors and volunteers. Like, what are the some common areas or options to collect and then listen to the data? How to, or how or where to do it? I guess that's my question.
I think that's a lovely question. I love it so much because that's where most of my energy spent in my first phone calls with most organizations when I'm talking, because they ask me the same thing. Where do we go
Where do we
and
go?
start collecting the data from? Where do we start? Well, this is what I say. If I give you an answer or you come up with an answer, 100% it is going to come biased because it will be based on what we
Mm,
have seen and felt and heard and
mm,
experienced, right? And while that is very important, but that lens is more important around the data listening phase when we are building the
mm,
context around making sense of that data. When you are in this early stage where you are right now building those tools, going out in the community, putting those data collection forms or surveys or focus groups, whatnot, I want you to think about not focusing on one group, but rather making it something universal, making it something that where every entity, every group has a space to respond to those questions. So what I mean by that is I usually tend to typically create surveys that goes out to the entire database. I will use segmentation. I will use it for donors, volunteers, board members, all the way up to
mm,
newsletter subscribers and event attendees. And then most survey tools or most any data collection tools, they have this option called logic, advanced logic, basic logic. You can use
mm,
those to really be sophisticated in who you are asking what, and then you can make
mm,
sure that donors get donors questions, volunteers get volunteers questions. The benefit of having one tool, one survey that goes out to the entire universe of all entities is that then when I am looking at the data on the back end,
mm,
I can see the overlaps. I can see that Yulia can also be a donor who is now a member and used to volunteer briefly for 6 months in 2023. I can see your
mm,
arc of engagement. I can see the full
mm,
picture. I can see the whole story. If I create, which happens most often, multiple different smaller little data collection tools, one goes out
mm,
to the volunteers, one goes out to the donors, chances are if you have more than one relationship with the organization, you will get 2 or 3 data collection forms. You will be asked
mm,
slightly different questions, but 2 or 3 different times. It very much can make you feel, am I being heard? Am I being
mm,
seen by this organization, or am I merely a data point by these different tools that once I have to respond as a volunteer, once I have to respond as a donor.
mm,
So what we can do when we are creating these tools is be very careful, very intentional, put that care in creating one single clean tool where we can ask these questions using logic and then be able to make sense of that data by creating that whole arc.
mm,
Meena, who came to us here, was motivated to do this So she became a volunteer. 6 months into our work, she also donated. So she's switching between. She has just applied for a board position. You get to see the whole arc of engagement as you are thinking about how to involve this person more in our work of co-dreaming. That's the benefit of where to start, how to start, and making it the whole universe, as opposed to thinking of which buckets to go and start with.
Yeah, makes sense. I would say it's probably also especially important if your organization right now don't have a centralized system, and if you're using separate tools for donors and volunteers and so on, maybe using spreadsheets, which is also, you know, that's where everyone starts. So
Yeah.
so I can see how that's specific. And I think you have a good point, right? If we don't have a clear data who is who, we might end up sending 3 different surveys or 3 different appeals, or it just goes back to also having like centralized tools. In our case, in Giveffect, we have everything in one place. So I feel like it's a little bit cleaner. But I agree. I thank you for sharing that point, because I think logically, and you talked about it, we come from our bias. My bias, I'm not an expert in any sense, but my bias tells me like, you should send the separate ones for everyone. So thank you for that input. I will reconsider some our internal surveys as well.
The other, okay, can I suggest one more benefit that I really personally like, which is sort of tangential to our topic? When we get back data from a single survey for all these different components, a benefit that I have really loved and seen is de-siloing of different departments. So all of a sudden, there are questions of plan gifts. The plan giving team is working with the major gifts team because there are questions that can be branched out and given to both the teams. So now, instead of working through their own department surveys, their own siloed surveys, they're working through the same set and they're talking to each other how to make the best sense of this when there is overlap. I find that an amazing benefit to make different departments talk.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they don't want to.
Yeah. While we are on the topic of surveys, I'm curious if you have any like tactical advice for everyone on the call in terms of what question maybe to include, or maybe what question, I don't know if you have anything like, oh, I've seen this question, but it typically a lot of people use, but it doesn't bring any value. I don't know if you have any advice on maybe
Oh, I love that question.
Something to include, or maybe something to remove.
Yeah, when you say something to remove, yeah, my brain always works like, what am I supposed to? Okay. Something to include, things that I do like to include and I don't usually see often are 2 questions. What motivated you to be involved with us? Like I've typically seen that as a open-ended question, like a 3 lines to add your response to that.
Right.
But that doesn't make it super actionable. So the way I would like to design these questions, or I do design these questions in my project, is I make it a checkbox question. I'm speaking a little bit more tactical here. I will make this a checkbox question with options of about 10 to 14 list of things and have people select top 3. Have people select top 4 out of those. Or if it's all, then maybe like depending on how big your list is. The reason, and you can always include there's another reason I involve with you, and there's a little bit of a text box that makes it way more actionable in terms of segmentation. So you can take that data back to your MailChimp or any place where you're using your newsletters, and you can segment out your level of motivation. The other reason I like the level of motivation is I can then look at against the question, like, how are you involved with the organization? So donors first motivation versus volunteers first motivation versus that helps me to understand a bit of the context with respect to local geography of the organization. So for example, I am right now here in BC, Canada, and one of the biggest challenges of the nonprofit sector here right now with volunteering is it's dropping. But we have the pool of volunteers is available who are looking for jobs. So when I'm looking at a survey data and I'm looking for motivation versus volunteers, I can take that relevant local geographical context and apply it to see, yes, there is a pool. here is the motivation. Maybe we need to think about motivating it toward this direction for the pool that exists. Like there is a benefit to that question. The other question that I like to ask is, what does generosity mean to you, or what does philanthropy mean to you? Now, those words, we can simplify it to a certain extent, but I usually tend to leave the words as is. What does generosity mean to you? Philanthropy can be a little bit harder to comprehend sometimes, and this comes with my own bias when I say that. But generosity mean to you is a simple statement that is accessible, and I leave it as an open text box question. And it's beautiful because when it comes back, you can pull out themes to understand how does your community think about generosity. That's the whole point we are doing this work, to build a world that cares, that thinks about kindness, that thinks about this work even when we are not around. The whole point is not for us to go on and on for 100 years. We want to live in a world where we don't need to constantly, where we don't have homelessness, where we don't have this food insecurity. So when we ask about what motivates people, what generosity means to them, we can work towards the direction where we can use some of that language, where we can use some of that purpose in our communication. So those are the two questions I like. The one that I'm not so fan of, but I do know that is useful, is how else would you, oh, there are two questions actually. One is, I'm not a great fan of the question, what languages do you speak at home? I've seen that way too often in the under demographic section. What languages you speak at home. It doesn't lead to any action. If no one on my team speaks Arabic and Hebrew, then what's the point of knowing that piece? Instead, you can use that under the trust context setting introduction of your data collection, that we are asking these questions because tie it to action. So if question is not leading to action, take it out. Same goes for a question like, how else do you want to engage with us, or how else do you want to hear from us in terms of communication? And then people list videos and TikTok and Instagram. But if you don't have an account on TikTok, if you don't have an account on Instagram, it's no point collecting that.
Makes sense. Thank you. Those are really great examples. And you touched a little bit on the demographic piece, but I wanted to just dig it a little bit deeper there. Like I think in the recent year, there was more like sensitivity around asking demographic questions. So I'm curious if you have also like any advice for people when they think about survey, if there's anything that they need to consider when building out the demographic question.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. Any person, any human being has at least about 24 or 25 big, broad categories of identity components. It can be about shape and size and color and ethnicity and, you know, what you can see and what you cannot, such as like the disability. So there are like a lot of different components of what constitutes a person. And those are like big, broad categories. Under each category, we can go deeper to look for multiple angles. The reason I'm saying and setting that up is because all of that can be converted into demographic questions. So any set can have, if we are going all full in detail, we can have about like 100 at least demographic questions. But we have to pick and choose which are the most relevant ones to ask and why are we asking. So I want us all to remember, in the benefit of this time that we have, don't ask questions just because we have seen them in other surveys of other organizations. Don't ask questions that we have always asked or have asked in the past survey. Ask questions that are relevant, that leads to some action, and you can actually do something with it, which is not just extractive. And for every question that you do include why are you including that question? Because I hear a very common challenge from most nonprofits saying, well, people are survey fatigued. They don't want to respond to survey. And that is kind of true. It's true that we have asked a lot, but the real reason is not that they're survey fatigued. They are dried of this lack of trust building through these data collection tools. This lack of context, this constant, give me your most personal information, and then I will hold it without anything back to you. Why did I ask it? How will I store it? How long will I store it? With all of that information gone, it causes a dent in the trust, and people don't want to do anything that is not trustworthy, especially right now in the last 6 months when the whole world feels in a constant chaos and conflict. So if we are doing a data collection in the next 6 months, I'm going to say, choose your demographic questions very carefully, include a reason, a context, make sure that it has an action associated. For example, if you're using collecting or asking for pronouns, include that you will be using it for name tags for your events, or you would be using it for appropriately addressing someone in the newsletters or the donor appeals, like whatever the reason is, include some concrete, specific examples. So it feels like more, and it should be more than I need to report it to funders. So give me your pronouns. That is not very trust building, right? But I will say those are some of the pieces I would include around the demographic section.
Yeah, no, this is so good. Thank you so much, Meena. That's fantastic to think about. One more thing, time flies, but a couple of things I also wanted to ask you about the data collection. Survey obviously is a fantastic tool, right? But as a nonprofit organization, I mean, 99% I would say have a donate button, or if your organization to have a volunteering program, that you have a volunteer application or service request form. There is this like different forms that already might be existing on someone else's website, but maybe specifically talking about the donate button. I feel like that's also a great tool for data collection and listening. Is there something that organizations can ask on the donation tool to help them to understand their donors? Would you recommend or not adding something like a question or some piece of the data?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 1 or 2 questions out of your annual survey can also stay on the donation form, can also be used multiple times on social media, almost like a continuous data listening throughout the year. So you are not relying on one single tool or one single project to bring back the data, right? And so on the donation page, you can include a question like, what motivated you to make this gift? Or right? And so you can include some like a question like that and take it back to your CRM or system, and then use it for some follow-up communication if you are doing or thinking about that in the future. If you haven't started, that's still, it's not the end of the world, but if you're thinking, you might want to use that in the future. What motivated you to give this gift? Or what do you think about this mission? Or some sort of a question that allows you to capture some language in how to talk to this person. Like when we start speaking to a new friend, a new person, we listen more. Hopefully we listen more. We ask questions and we understand where they're coming from, their context, their background. And before making assumptions on their behalf, we ask a lot of things as we are building and developing a relationship. It's almost like that. The donate button is someone is taking an action, and you can ask one or 2 easy questions. The other tip that I would leave here, which I learned something fairly recently in one of the projects, is someone has this continuous story bank that they create, and then they leave a prompt and not just a question, like 2 or 3 prompts and a text box, a little bit of a nice, neat feature where someone can like leave, what was the happiest moment when you were looking at our website? What was the happiest moment if you have engaged with us? What was that? What did that look like? And they collected that instead of anything else on the donation form. And that was pretty neat and interesting too.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I can see how that I love that open-endedness, but it doesn't also feel like if I'm the donor, I don't feel pressured. Like it's reframing. So I appreciate it. And I think the question that you mentioned, what motivates you, I mean, it's perfectly translates to volunteering, right? And volunteer form as well.
Yeah.
Love it. So last question before we go into the live Q&A, and just a reminder for everyone, we do have a live Q&A. I see some questions that already came in. Please feel free to utilize the Q&A button and add more questions. But my last question would be, so many nonprofit collect information, right? And we see it sometimes even among our clients. They collect information, but that they don't necessarily know how to utilize it or what to do with it, take next step. Do you have any advice on how to engage, connect the data, especially if someone using siloed systems?
How to connect the data? Well, you do need something. Let's say we have like 2 or 3 Excel spreadsheets, and I'm going to come back with an example. I was working with the food bank, and they gave me like 2 or 3 spreadsheets. 2 of them were about donors, 1 of them was about volunteers. And they were coming from 2 different systems because they had one CRM just for the donors and the volunteers were a different system. So obviously there were two very different looking spreadsheets. But something that you have to find something, a common thread that where the 2 sheets can connect. It can be the most logical thing would be an ID, right? A constituent ID or relationship ID. If that doesn't exist, then you have to go to the next logical thing, which is the email address. So if there are common email addresses, you start connecting those 2. If that doesn't exist, you go to address. Now, when I connect 2 spreadsheets through a data point like address, I'm a little hesitant to put everything. I would call that a household, but I would still be cautious of going to that household to ask about their preferences, because you cannot assume that one address means everybody lives under that same roof or feel like a household. And there can be a lot of layered assumptions by just using the address, but only for the purposes of connecting 2 Excel spreadsheets. Start looking for data points that you can connect it with. You should not obviously connect it through name, because name, Meena, can be a name to many different people, and you can use name. But once you have that place where you can connect these points, then you can use some of the Excel functionalities, if you're using Excel, to connect those and build a master table data set, almost like connecting the 2 sheets and bringing all different fields together. And the next step would be to look at what fields do they exist? What have we brought from these 2 sheets? Have we brought about donation history? Have we brought about volunteering history? You will look through that. And my usual first step, and this is where I promise I'll stop. I can go very nerdy into this answer. My usual step is, after you have connected different points and you're sitting in front of a data set, don't feel rushed to create charts. Don't feel rushed to create insights. Take a little bit of time. I very intentionally add 7 days in all my analysis to just sit with the Excel spreadsheet with my cup of coffee and sit with it and look at the data to see what is it saying. Read through the open-ended responses. Look through what is it saying under someone who says, I absolutely don't like the mission, or I don't think they're doing a great job in the mission. Those who are in the outliers, who come up under very negative or very positive, look at the trend, what they are saying. Spend some time, and you will develop a sense of what it is saying, and then get into the charts mode and PowerPoint mode or report mode or whatever that is. We, as a world, we are too focused on creating the how part and how it can look nice and design based, but we are not so focused on, well, what's the meaning of it fundamentally?
Oh, this is so good. And I'm so guilty of it. It's just, you get to the motion. I'm just create, check mark, next, go.
Right?
Thank you for that advice. Yes. Right. And get my very last, I promise, and we're jumping into the question. Once you have the data, right? Whether you connected all the spreadsheets and you have a mass file, or maybe use something like Giveffect and everything is in one place. In the context of year-end giving, do you have any advice for maybe what's to pay attention or look for in preparations for? I know it's very loaded, big question.
No, I'm happy to make it more tactical. One of the questions I really like, especially if you're thinking about your year-end giving and donor surveys, is you want to include a question about what would interest you, what range would you be interested in making a gift? And I've seen organizations being a little hesitant in the start, like, should I include that question? You absolutely should. First of all, if you're not asking, you are sending out a message that you don't need the support almost. Number two, you do want to let people know that you always have space for them to come and engage with you. And number three, you do include in the question, us asking you this question is not solicitation. It's just us understanding who and what we can do with this, whatever this information is. So you're sitting in that context too. The alternative I've often seen nonprofits do is ask, what is your total household income? They don't ask most nonprofits, what do you feel most comfortable in making a gift for, like this range, but instead, what is your total household income? That comes with a very big assumption that if I know your household income, you should be donating to a certain level, more than that. But we are talking about generosity. We are not talking about a few financial transactions. So we need to pair the question of what generosity means to you and where you feel comfortable in donating and those ranges. And the way I have used it in year-end fundraising is I would set that question and I will then cross tab it or pull the people who say different responses that I'm comfortable giving this, this, and this. I follow up that question asking, would you be okay if a staff member of ours reach out to you for the option you selected above? And people a lot of times select, yes, I am. And then I will give that to the staff member and say, here are the people who said they are willing to make a gift interested in this range. Go talk to them and see what you want to do. So it becomes immediately actionable without any assumptions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. All right, let's turn the table. Let's go to the questions. We have a number of them here, and we're going to start with the first question. And it is from Paige. What is a good question to ask to understand how our donors or volunteers feel appreciated, or to know the impact they're making?
To know the impact. Okay, I'm gonna also try to go into. All right, good question to ask to understand how our donors feel appreciated or to know there. Paige, that's a great question. I have tried a few different things, and you can do too. You can include questions like, do you feel included in our activities? I have included that question as along with a few other questions. Do you feel like an active participant in your donorship or in your engagement with us? A question like that. I'll set that up and ask donors and volunteers. I also directly ask, do you feel appreciated in this? I've seen way more often donors being asked, do you like your donorship experience with us, or rate your donorship experience or donorship engagement with us? But it doesn't get to the heart of it. So you can use the word appreciation in the question itself. The only thing I will put like with an asterisk mark is make sure that you're making it two questions. If you're using the same survey that goes out both to the donors and the volunteers, you don't want to club two questions. Someone can have a great donorship experience, but not so great volunteering experience. And you need to know both of them. So don't club it into the two in under one question and have them under two. But great question, Paige.
Fantastic. All right. So the next one is, do you have samples of survey to send to donors to collect this data? Or maybe, you have any resources you can
Oh, absolutely.
somewhat.
I have a resource called 60 Most Useful Donor Survey Questions. I do a lot of surveys in a year. So I pulled about 60 sometime last year when I was feeling like, oh, I really want to do a different kind of work. I'm happy to forward it to Yulia and Tara and Hannah, and they can forward it to you.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So Stacey, we are gonna we're gonna add it to the follow-up email. So for everyone on the call, again, please check. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording. So we'll try to include it there as well. And thanks so much, Meena, and thanks Stacey for this question. All right, the next one is from Gabriela. And Meena, you see the questions as well, right?
No.
It's
I
quite
could
no. Okay,
before
so
Stacey and Paige's question and no longer
you're
can.
good.
But yeah, I can hear from you when you're reading. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, just wanted to double check. So Gabriela is asking, do you think it's valuable for organizations to collect data from outside of their current donor pool? For example, utilizing surveys or user testing usability platforms to reach a larger audience and better understand what motivates people to give or to give feedback on specific messaging, website experience, giving donation experience.
Mm-hmm.
Other there's a little bit other best practices for doing this effectively.
Okay. I feel like Gabriela sounds like my kind of person. Yulia, like, yeah, I see this big question. Very fun, nerdy question. Okay, so I do think
Love
there
that.
is benefit, Gabriela, if you want to go beyond your existing donor pool. One thing that you do want to remember is when you have the luxury, the privilege to go and talk to your current donor pool, you can make your surveys and focus groups anonymous as well as non-anonymous, right? That you can have the option to reach Meena, your donor, to Meena's email, directly to Meena's email. You can also send one common survey to both Yulia and Meena, and you don't need to know if it was the response from Yulia or Meena, right? That's the benefit when you're speaking of your current donor pool. For anything outside, for broader, you can't really go and talk to individual website visitors. You can't really go and talk to the individual people visiting some of your digital assets, but you can still capture some of those responses. So anything broader than the current pool is more likely to be anonymous. That means we need to think two kinds of questions. One that is relevant throughout, like an evergreen question for throughout the year. And two, should you need to follow up with those people? Can you? So one set of questions that I do like to include. So first part, is it beneficial or not? Yes, it is. It depends on the context. For example, I have seen some foundations doing their DEI survey, or like how inclusive members feel and donors feel in the community for them. They included a 3-question survey on top of their annual audience survey to their donors on their website. So anyone who is visiting the website in this next 6 months gets a pop-up after 20 seconds of being on the website that, can you answer these 3 questions? I think 20 or 30 seconds, I don't remember exactly, but some after some level of time. And there is benefit in that because they get to test then, you get to hear then what motivated someone to be in your digital home, your website, your social media profiles, they're all somewhat of your digital home. Someone visited your digital home, you can ask them questions. Why are you here? What motivated you to be here? That's one set of good questions that you can ask. The other one is, would you be interested to talk to our staff member, or would you be interested in a follow-up with one of our and then you can have some options for them, like, yes, I'm interested in volunteering, yes, I'm interested to donate, yes, I'm interested in a certain project. And then have them share their email or address or contact information that you can use. So those are like, but if you are going for beyond your current donor pool, you have to be really careful that it's not too long because you don't want to lose them. If someone is taking the time to respond or engage with your data collection tool who hasn't already been in your universe, you have to be very careful in what you're asking and how much time you are expecting from them. So short answer is yes, it can be beneficial. Be careful, be cautious, and think of the context, and it can be useful.
Amazing. We are on time, but we're going to have one more last question, if that's okay with you, from Alicia. Do you think organizations, nonprofits should collect data from our donors who are not individuals, but larger organizations, foundations, or institutions?
Okay. Also, I can now see the questions all of a sudden again. So, Alicia, I can read the question now too. I will say yes, 1000% yes. You should definitely not just use these tools to listen from individuals, but large organizations, foundations, and institutions as well. you can be creative, whether it should be like one single survey, or for larger foundations and institutions, you can set up a focus group or one-on-one interviews, depending on how many we are talking about, the number we are talking about. But the short answer is yes, you should collect data from understanding, do they feel seen? Does their idea of generosity feel reflected in the work you do? Because that's, again, the purpose. We are here doing the work that we are doing. Are there ways where this, or interest from these foundations and large institutions and organizations to engage with yours deeper and more meaningfully? If they are more interested, then you can be creative in how to make those partnerships happen in the future. And so, yes, absolutely. Do include them in your projects.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. And Meena, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. I see a lot of thank yous in the chat, and I learned myself a lot. By the way, when you finish this video, I think there is a very short survey afterwards, but we will redo the survey now that we learned so much in this session. So before we wrap up today, Meena, how can people find you, connect with you?
So I am
You want to
available
share?
yes, I am available on LinkedIn. You can find me through Meena Das or my company Namaste Data, or you can visit my website, which is NAMASTEDATA, namastedata.org.org. I know Tara and Hannah will be sending it out. You can also reach out me via my email address, which is meenadas@namastedata.org. I am fairly active on most of all these channels and always open with a cup of coffee to talk about data collection.
Thank you so much, Meena. And I do believe all the information is in the chat. So our colleague Tara has mentioned that. And for everyone who is still on the call today, we are having our second session tomorrow, same time, it's 1 p.m. And we are going to be diving deep into, okay, how do you use the data? How do you use workflow? And how do you prepare even more for the upcoming year and giving season? All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Again, thank you, Meena, and have a fantastic rest of your week, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.